Are we live? All right. OBS says we're going out. Let's give it a minute.
Yeah.
Are we live? Okay, there we go.
Okay,
We're,
looks like
we're
it's
on.
starting.
Oh, boy. Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Jedi Knights of the Round Table. Today, it's me and Tracer,
Hello.
and we're going to be talking about the latest news from Assassin's Creed 5th. Assassin's Creed. Ooh, tongue tied. Assassin's Creed's 15th anniversary celebration thing. Well, you may be asking to yourselves, you said you didn't care, so why are you doing this? Well, streams take far less effort than making videos, so
And plus, this has proven to be kind of fun. So,
yeah,
yeah, deal with it.
deal with it. Anyway, to start things off, normally I would go over a whole soliloquy and have something already pre-written, but everything I said about Assassin's Creed and the state that it's in, I've already said in my previous video, and if you haven't watched it yet, go and watch it. So, to open things up, Tracer, floor is yours.
All right, then. First, let
Tongue
me
tied.
illustrate
Assassin's
this. My
Creed's
experience in the
15th
Assassin's
anniversary
Creed games can be
celebration.
literally limited down to the very first one. I've not played any of the games past that point. However, being a historian, I admit I was kind of intrigued by a lot of the history of the Assassin's Creed games. Even if I disagree with a great deal of the interpretation of the individual games themselves, the fact is that in its heyday, Assassin's Creed went to great lengths to make itself at least historically authentic. It felt like the time period you were in, and it knew how to use its historical periods to its best possible use. This is why, arguably, the peak of the game series was with Assassin's Creed 2, Revelation, basically the games set around Ezio. The Renaissance was a golden era of political machinations, and there's just so much you could do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunately why in the later Assassin's Creed games we started to see less and less interesting time periods as we started to go into more, I would say, pop culture time periods. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that the American Revolution, pirates, and that sort of thing are inherently bad. They actually did a pretty decent job of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then we start to go into things like Syndicate and Unity, and God forbid, Origins and the rest of those that literally stopped being historical fiction and became more like fantasy with some history kind of sprinkled in.
Down to the point where they had actual fantasy monsters as bosses in the games from Origins onward.
Yeah. And what was worse is that the game stopped being about assassins.
Mm-hmm.
We basically lost any and all ties to the assassins, the original crew you worked with in the first game, who, yes, were based off of real people. And let's put it this way. In the game Assassin's Creed Syndicate, yeah, you have to protect Karl Marx.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can kill him, but from the story's perspective, you have to protect this guy. Karl Marx, the creator of socialism and later on fascism and communism.
Mm-hmm.
This guy,
Yep.
the guy would cause some of the worst genocides in human history through his ideology. Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where you could really feel the internal politics of Ubisoft.
Not even the
Obviously
worst.
being,
That isn't even the most cringe part about Syndicate, because one of the faction leaders, one of the gangs under the Assassin's control, female to male transsexual in an age where transsexuality wasn't even a concept yet.
yeah, this person probably would have been shunned even from the criminal underworld.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the sad thing is even now, which we're going to eventually talk about Mirage later, uh, a lot of people are heralding Mirage as a return to the classical era of Assassin's Creed, where you're in the Middle East, you're actually an actual assassin, but there's a
Well,
problem.
you're not so much an assassin as they didn't exist yet. They're still using the
Yeah,
old trappings of League of Shadows and Order of Secrets, or whatever the new names are, that are basically just the Templars and the Assassins. Because making new
yeah,
names is far more creatively easier than making reasons why these names predate the Crusades.
yeah. And the thing is, again, people are heralding it as a return to classic Assassin's Creed. There's a problem though. It's going to be set in a time period. I'm not going to say what time period because we got to leave something to talk about there, but there's not a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen within the time frame that it's set in. Like compared to, Assassin's Creed, the first one where it was set during the Third Crusade. You had a lot of interesting things to explore with there. You had the Crusaders versus the Saracens. You had the internal politics of both factions. You obviously had the Knights Hospitalitors, the Knights Templar, the Teutonic Knights. You just had so many different things to just explore and put your teeth into. Whereas with this new game, I struggle to think of what the hell it's going to be about. Because at the end of the day, Assassin's Creed is, let's just say it's kind of the marrying of Prince of Persia with Tom Clancy. It's
Mm.
about political espionage. I mean, you're an assassin after all, you have to kind of deal with that.
Fittingly enough, Ubisoft has the rights to both those series.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised there's never been a crossover. That being said, John Clark, Sam Fisher, those guys, they would totally kill every single assassin that's ever existed. I'm sorry. Those guys are just heads and shoulders above these other schlups.
Mm-hmm. Whew. So, with that out of the way, shall we get into it, or do you want to mention how it also mirrors your experiences with For Honor, an Ubisoft game you have played a lot
All
of?
right. Yeah, I'll be very brief about this. Okay. Again, full context. I'm an historian. Not necessarily by trade. It's more of a hobby of mine. I've always been fascinated by it. And the thing is, I have never really liked the depiction of the Knights Templar in the Assassin's games. I understand that there's a difference between the Templars, as in the Illuminati, basically, and the actual Knights Templar. They basically kind of took over the order. But regardless, if you know anything about history, you know that the story of Assassin's Creed arguably should be switched. The Templars, for the most part, were actually a force for good in the Middle East. They actively protected all of the travelers there, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, it didn't matter. And more often than not, they'd actually get into fights with the Kingdom of Jerusalem, basically those guys, those crusaders, who would basically slaughter these helpless pilgrims. And the Templars would more often than not fight these guys, fight fellow Christians to protect Muslims. That's how seriously they took their job.
Mm-hmm.
They also instituted banking, large scale masonry and architecture. I mean, they were a force for good. I
To
mean,
make a
yeah,
long
they
story
had,
short, it's their dabbling in banking that ended up getting them wiped out.
yeah, let's just say the French owed them money and they didn't want to pay.
Yep.
Uh, Sadly enough for them, though, most of the money that they tried to take from the Templars, the Hospitalitors took it, and
Haha.
France still ended up being bankrupt. So yeah, the Assassins, on the other hand, were a destabilizing force. They always had been. They were utilized to obviously eliminate political rivals and sow chaos and destruction. Now, at first it was fine because they were for hire. Anybody could use them. But the Assassins, as they grew in power, started to use that skill set to start killing its own personal enemies, which included not just the Crusaders, the Christians, it also included the Sultanates, Muslims, even Templars.
There's
It
even
got
a
so
legend even has it that Salah himself was visited one night by an assassin who left a knife and a feather at his bedside when he awoke. Basically, as a message, don't mess with us. we can get to you.
Pretty much. I mean, it got so bad that there were multiple attempts by Christians and Muslims actually working together to try and take out the assassins. Eventually, the Mongols did it for them because they got tired of their crap and they just razed their I don't know what you call it, their monastery, their fortress to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, it's the exact same place that the Templar siege at the very start of Assassin's Creed.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's actually interesting is that there's real history there.
There's
That
an
being
actual
said, the one thing
Masyaf.
wrong, yeah, there's one problem with that scene though. It wasn't just the Templars sieging that place; there were also Saracens. Because again, this is after Saladin got visited, so he figured, well, I need to set down the law with these guys. So how it relates to For Honor is, uh, if you played it, you know that at one point there was a crossover event with the Assassin's Creed series. And one of the things that was released with it was cosmetic packs.
Mm-hmm.
One for the Assassins, one for the Templars. I don't have any hard numbers on me right now, but I do remember seeing somewhere that more people bought the Templar pack than the Assassin one.
Because the
And to be
Templar pack is more aesthetically fitting with the factions of For Honor. There was no Islamic faction. Still isn't.
yeah, but it also relates to the fact that, well, perhaps not in number, in coverage and popularity, the Knights are probably the best faction in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And what it relates to as a point is Assassin's Creed, ironically, has gone and done every single era except for the ones people actually wanted them to do. They never did feudal Japan. They've never done World War One or World War Two. Well, okay, let me scratch that for a second. There was that one point, I'm not sure if it was in a mobile game or what have you, where they did do the Russian Revolution, but that's about it.
It was in a
Uh,
side-scrolling game, and they did do the World War II in a little bit. In was it Sin? No, it was Unity.
It was in Unity where you're in Paris. That's it. Just like in Unity, you also start that game off as a Knights Templar. I don't mean as a Templar as in the Illuminati guys like in Rogue. I mean as a bona fide Knights Templar.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, most people are in agreement that if that had been the game, Unity would have been a much more fascinating story,
Assuming
rather
it
than
wasn't as
some,
buggy.
yeah. But at the same time, the story would have been better than some half-assed, politicized version of the French Revolution,
Half-assed,
which,
politicized, and the main character-driven plot is basically a repeat of Assassin's Creed 2's entire story. There is no difference
yeah.
between Arno Dorian and Ezio.
So, yeah, people want to play Templars. They want to, we've been spending all this time playing as the cool, edgy, Batman-esque assassins. Well, guess what? People want to play as Captain America sometimes. Sometimes they want to play as the stalwart Christian paladins. They want to play as the badass Knights Templar. I sure as hell do. And I think a lot of people do as well. But Ubisoft is never going to do that because it's going to have to actually depict the Knights Templar not in the way that they have. They're going to have to get over their internal politics to do that, which
Yep.
they're never going to do.
Yep. French gonna French. And
So,
the degradation is
so
pretty similar to what happened with For Honor. Started out as a nice grounded series, eventually adopted all these friggin' fantasy elements, and just got flushed down the toilet.
yeah, the thing is about For Honor is I think where it finally just lost its soul as a game was around the time that they introduced Warmonger and Griffin. Now, if you played the game around that time, you know they started introducing weird fantasy elements like Draconite infestations, Warmonger basically being uh, COVID-chan or whatever the anime character's called. Basically, she's a Nurglite. She's spreading plagues and what have you, and Griffin's just Griffin. He literally just steals from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's at that point I think the game basically finally died. It introduced a lot of core mechanics that just kind of hurt the game. The CCU update, for example. I've never been a fan of it. It took a lot of the fun of the various characters away. And what's worse is that the game is more obsessed about introducing new payable content than taking a page out of Rainbow Six Siege's book, which is dedicate seasons to just fixing stuff.
Yep.
Oh, sure, we have, things like Warriors Den and the testing grounds, but that's not enough. I, you have Lawbringer, for example, who to this day has still not gotten a proper rework as a character, even though he is arguably one of the coolest characters in the game. And
Hmm.
a lot of people are dying for him to be remade. I mean, on top of that, they refuse to do historically accurate suits of armor for the Knights. They refuse to give any armor to the Vikings as a whole. The samurai, well, they finally got some really good bling, but we basically had to deal with what 5 years of them wearing
Yeah.
stupid wooden armor.
Yeah.
Nothing
Despite
looks nice.
despite what
Everything looks dirty.
despite what MatPat says, the Vikings are not nudists, and the samurai don't just clad themselves in friggin' bamboo.
No, no, they don't. And now we have a pirate with flintlock pistols.
Oh
We
my
have a
god.
freaking we
Introducing
have an Egyptian
actual
now.
introducing firearms into a game about medieval fantasy fighting. Yeah, I imagine that's gonna go swimmingly.
Yeah, and the thing is, you could have introduced firearms in the way it was supposed to. Because the problem is you're introducing flintlocks, which was a typical firearm of the 17th and 18th century, into a time period that's very clearly supposed to be the 15th century.
Yep.
Firearms did exist back then, but they weren't flintlocks. You didn't even have matchlocks at the time. It was basically a metal tube with a burn hole at the back, and you used a burning fuse to basically fire off a projectile. It was crude and it was primitive, but that's where it started. And you do see a little bit of that with, the factions having explosives, grenades and what have you. And honestly, you could easily see cannons exist in this time period.
Hmm.
Of course, they can't make up their mind if they want to be set in the 12th century or the 15th century. It's just freaking all over the place.
Eventually, they just threw their hands and said, "We're everywhere. Let's turn this into Deadliest Warrior of the game." Even though there was a Deadliest Warrior of the game, and it was awful. You remember
Yeah,
Deadliest
the
Warrior?
thing I remember it. It's a game that had interesting mechanics, but just was janky as all hell. Not even
Uh
the
huh.
fun kind of janky, more like the unplayable kind of janky.
Based on a
The
TV,
thing is,
based on a TV series that's essentially Death Battle, but even more cringe.
yeah, but at the same time, it was at least entertaining.
It was. I liked
I
the
mean,
Napoleon
easily my
episode.
favorite. Well, my favorite episode honestly had to be the French Musketeers versus the Ming Warriors, just because of how the two groups got so into it and they started trash talking each other. It was actually pretty hysterical watching this happen. Um, but yeah, I mean, on top of that, the lore for For Honor's all over the place. They basically kind of gave up on it. Honestly, I think they kind of stopped trying after they did Black Prior, because that's really the only time they really started and adding interesting stuff to the game.
It
They
took
didn't
them
do
that
anything.
long to introduce a knight character who was a knight and not a Roman, and a knight character who uses a kite shield.
Yeah, despite the fact that you had those 3D trailers, which were made by another studio, by the way, that had knights with kite shields with um, I don't know, they were bastard swords. Yes, there's an actual sword called a bastard sword.
Mm-hmm.
To explain the bastard sword, you have a standard arming sword, which is a one-handed weapon. Then you have a long sword, which is a two-handed weapon. A bastard sword is in between. It's a one and a half handled weapon. So it kind of allows you to sort of do both. Not the best, but it gives you some advantages. But yeah, we had all that stuff, and honestly, the models back then just looked so much better than even what we have nowadays. You had knights who actually wore full suits of armor. You had Vikings actually wear armor. Yeah, it was leather, but you still had full padded leather armor, which made sense. You actually had them wearing mail underneath that. Um, I mean, you know what's even worse is that you have. I know we're going forever on For Honor, but I'll just put this my last point. They introduced the Chinese faction, the Wulin, which actually kind of grew in a lot of people. It's the closest thing we got to like a Saracen faction,
I
which
liked it.
I
On you.
yeah, unironically, we knights would love to have a Saracen faction in the game because then we could properly have a crusade.
Yes. Deus Volt.
Yes, we Deus Vult, we want to properly Deus Vult, but the Chinese were the closest thing we had to that. And the thing is, the Chinese faction were actually pretty interesting because they pulled from a lot of pretty cool Chinese history.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys, Zhu Zhang, he's actually based off of a real Chinese general.
Again, Guan
They
Yu.
didn't do any, yeah, Guan Yu. They didn't do anything with it though. They didn't do any stories. They didn't do any kind of lore updates. They did nothing. They just showed up.
Yep.
Where are these guys from? Why are they here?
Who
Few
cares?
sentences at most. Like you easily could have seen this expansion have some story missions where you could play as the Chinese, you could play as the other factions having to deal with these guys, something, anything, but they didn't. They just introduced the faction and then just kind of left it as is.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sorry to say, guys, but For Honor, I love you, but you're dead. You're dead to me, and I don't think there's any way you can really bring it back. Maybe they could fix it in a sequel. I don't know. But I played you for about 5 years and I'm done. I'm done being light spammed. I'm done with your janky, crappy animations. And
Done
I'm
with the
just
toxic
kind of
fan base.
done with the toxic fan base. I'm done with the fact that you guys are giving us broken characters and you're refusing to fix any of them.
Yep.
And your idea of fixing them is literally to make every hero the same. Everybody has unblockables. They have dodge attacks. They have some kind of bash, where you hit somebody. Even Valkyrie's new update literally has her, and has the ability for her to go into an all guard, which is basically she hunkers down behind her shield and then bash you. That's already being used over. That's already being broken. That's already being exploited because people can't react to it. So she's gonna have to go right back to the chopping board because now they've suddenly made her too OP,
Yeah.
which is such a shame because when that trailer dropped in 2012, I was hyped because we got a grim, kind of grounded, dark looking medieval, not simulator, but it's knights, Vikings, and samurai. It looked fascinating. It looked interesting,
It looked like
and it
something you'd
introduced
listen to Sabaton while playing.
yeah, and it introduced a lot of interesting medieval mechanics that people didn't know about. The Mordhau, for example, where you take your blade and you use the handle as a blunt instrument. Use it to bash somebody's head in. Nobody really knew about that outside of sword enthusiasts,
Mm-hmm.
and yet here it was. Being put into a game. It looked fascinating. It also, people, my preferred execution of Warden is end them rightly. That's just so freaking hilarious. You stab him in the eye. You take out the guard piece, or sorry, you take out the pommel, and you check the pommel. So, actual thing comes from an actual German fight manual, and just it was so hilarious. I had to get it, and I've not regretted buying that thing.
Well, maybe now since you're not gonna get that money back.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
we
no,
we
basically.
we talked so long about For Honor, and that's pretty much just a sign of how little I really want to talk about Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
go ahead.
like we said before, Assassin's Creed stopped being Assassin's Creed. It stopped being, an historical espionage game. It
That's
became basically high fantasy with sprinklings of historical stuff thrown in, which is fine as its own game series. If Odyssey and Origins had been set as its own game series, and Valhalla, set as their own game series, it probably would have done better.
the sad thing is
Make that
they're already doing that. What Black Sails is basically a multiplayer version of the sailing combat stuff from Black Flag made into its own game. So they
they
would and could do that. They just won't.
Yeah, they won't because they got to milk the Assassin's Creed franchise instead of making something new.
Yep. And they got to continued yearly releases because that
All the
is always a
while,
sign of a successful franchise.
yep, yep, and all the while they continue to butcher the history of every single time period that they touch.
Yep.
Origins completely character assassinate Julius Caesar and Cleopatra.
Uh huh.
And in general, they actually completely butcher most of the Egyptian politics at the time.
Assassin's Creed
Let's see.
Odyssey. Apparently, women who were basically highly regarded by the Spartans are sent to war and thrown off cliff sides. A
Yeah,
practice
I'm sorry if
they did not even do to all of their male babies, just the deformed ones.
Yeah, folks, here's the thing. Spartan women were trained to fight, and that's actually why in Greece they're often described as being very beautiful. They're very, very fit, very physically active. The thing is, though, they were never meant to actually fight.
Nope.
Their job was to protect Sparta while the men were gone.
Yep. Same thing with the
And
shield.
it,
Same thing with Viking shield maidens, which is going to come up when we mention Valhalla. Viking women were trained to fight. They were trained to defend their homes. Same thing with samurai women. Same thing with
Mhm.
a lot of warrior women throughout history. There was, like, you can point to some instances: Molly Pitcher, Boudica, Jeanne d'Arc. They are not the rule. They are the exception.
Yeah, you do have individual women who did go to war and even were commanders.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you actually find this far more common in something like the Byzantines or Persian history, where it was a lot more common. In fact, some of the most powerful politicians at the time in the Byzantine Empire were women.
Yep.
But the thing is, like Kippa said, it's not a rule; it's an exception.
Mm-hmm.
And in every single one of these points, it was during a desperate time when basically they were running out of men. Joan of Arc, for example, showed up during the tail end of the Hundred Years' War against the
And won the
English,
whole
where,
thing.
yeah, the French were basically getting their asses kicked. They were disorganized, disheartened, and here comes this teenage girl who's basically saying, "Y'all aren't man enough. Come follow me. We're gonna beat the British." Or sorry, not the British. It would have been the English at the time.
Her
And
exact
I
words were kill the English. Their concept of individual rights will undermine our tyrants.
wasn't probably quite like that, but yeah, she was obviously a French patriot. And the thing is, I don't think Joan ever actually did any real fighting. Yeah, she wore armor, she did command,
She would
but
have
she
been
never actually did any fighting,
from
as far as I know.
from my understanding of the story of Joan d'Arc, she was like in that very first battle she was involved in fighting, but afterwards, because they believed her to be basically God's messenger, and because the legend picked up really quickly, and she did believe that God sent her to lead the French to victory, which is why she was executed. Because
Yeah, burned at the stake for being a heretic.
yeah, that was considered heresy, but the English also wanted one up on the French, because salty.
Yeah, because they came that close to winning.
Yep.
Uh, the
She,
other thing about Odyssey that's just absolutely weird, and Koopa, you did touch up on this, is the game is kind of set around Cassandra.
yep.
Like you do have
You have a
Alexios.
choice
He is
with Valhalla and with Odyssey. You have a choice between a male protagonist and a female protagonist. In both games,
uh
the protagonist is canonically female. In both games, the protagonist is canonically lesbian, which, if you know anything about Assassin's Creed, in which all of the historic stuff is taking place in genetic memories locked within someone in the present day, that is literally impossible because if they were lesbians, they would have no offspring.
What's even worse is that I'm sorry to say this, guys. Yeah, Greece was notorious for having lots of gay people. Like
Yep.
to the point that the Maccabees, for example, basically rebelled against that. And I think a lot of the Bible's own views
Here's the
on
thing
the
about that,
degeneracy of,
and
yeah,
I said this in my video. It was the men who were gay. It was
hmm
always the men. They considered
not the women.
lesbianism to be degenerate. This is why they feared the Amazons, which were basically the Bulgars, because their women were a lot of them were large and scary, and they believed, and this was a way for them to villainize the Bulgars. Insisted that they were lesbians, like the women of Lesbos.
Yeah, and the thing is about the Legend of Lesbos is, which ironically enough is actually somewhat tied to James Bond with the movie Octopussy, where you have that cult of women who kind of live on an island off the coast of India, and they're kind of feared, they kind of reviled, they have political connections. They're largely just made up of nothing but beautiful women. Same thing with Lesbos.
Mm-hmm.
Lesbos was not well regarded. It was actually kind of made to be sort of a grim fairy tale lesson sort of thing. You know, don't trust the people of Lesbos. Don't trust those women.
Yep.
So yeah,
Lesbianism was highly frowned upon by the very, very gay ancient Greeks.
even the Vikings. I shouldn't even call them Vikings. The Norse people, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Danes, what have you.
Because Viking isn't a
Um,
people, it's a job.
it's a job. You're a pirate, basically. That's what Viking is. I mean, you're going on Vikinger, which is to go raid. Um, and again, the thing is about the Greeks, the thing about the Norse people, what have you, is that women were a valuable resource.
Yep.
We are talking about a people who are constantly fighting, constantly losing boys, constantly losing men, and
It
women
turns
are
out if
absolutely
you lose
valuable.
your women, there goes your civilization.
Yeah,
Funny
it's
how
the
that
reason
works.
why. Yeah, it's the reason why women had more rights in certain parts of ancient Greece and the Norse countries
In Sparta, they
than they
outright
did in
had
their.
equal rights to men when they
Yeah.
weren't at war. The men during war, the men would go to war, but the women always were allowed to own businesses, allowed to own
hmm
property, allowed to run their own businesses, allowed to vote.
Yeah, basically. Because at the end of the day, the women were valuable.
Yep.
They needed them to replace the losses that they were constantly incurring. That's why the women had so much power. And that even, remember earlier when I said some of the most powerful people in the Byzantine Empire were women? Again, that extends from that. Women were desperately needed by the Byzantines to make up for their losses. Women had tremendous political power.
Even after the Byzantine Empire fell and got taken over by the highly Islamic, highly misogynistic Ottomans, that still didn't stop being the case because, well, the Ottomans were constantly at war themselves. Sometimes they were constantly at war with themselves.
Yeah, pretty much, which is kind of why I don't like Assassin's Creed. Well, was it
It was
Revelations?
Revelation set in the Ottoman Empire, yes.
I hate Revelations so much because the good guys in that story are the Ottomans, not the Byzantines, not the people who just lost their homeland
Well,
and are now turning to the Templars to get it back.
well, to be fair,
Eh,
the head of the Templars was the prince to be Sultan, the crown prince. Uh,
he is, but you spend most of the game killing Byzantines. I'm like, why am I doing
and the
this?
one time you
Obviously,
kill an Ottoman, you kill the Janissary, it turns out he was trying to undermine the Templar plot.
there you go. Yeah, again, it's the personal politics of the writers basically showing themselves in. Again, we're talking about basic, not even French hipsters. These are French Canadian hipsters. Um, I, I, I think at some point, quite a few of the writers were possibly Arab, but I don't know.
They do
Again, I don't have a.
advertise their multicultural team in front of every game. At first, it was
Yeah,
just to keep themselves from being suicide bombed. Now it's a mark of pride for them, and they even talk about how
yeah.
diverse genders they have.
Which is whatever, whatever. You guys still cannot make good
I
games
don't care. I
because
don't care who you sleep with. I don't care who you are or where you come from. Make an interesting game, and be all end all.
yeah, because at the end of the day, you're not making a movie, you're not making a political statement, you're trying to make an entertaining story. You're trying to make a video game for people to go and buy and invest hours in.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, when you look at the origins of Assassin's Creed, it was, for all intents and purposes, a Prince of Persia spinoff.
Yep.
It used the same engine. It was originally supposed to be another Prince of Persia game,
Mm-hmm.
but they decided, hey, this is cool enough
Got the Devil
to
May
just
Cry
make it his own
treatment.
thing. Yeah,
For those of you who
and there
don't
was,
know, Devil May Cry started out as one of the prototypes for Resident Evil 4.
and it went off to be its own thing. There was passion in it. And that's the thing is when you look at the history of Assassin's Creed's development, yeah, a lot of the original people who made the game franchise, they're gone. They pretty much all of them left by the time that Black Flag had shipped.
Jade
That's
Raymond was
why
gone
every
before the
game,
Ezio trilogy was up.
yep, every single game thereafter has been produced by a revolving door of developers that more or less might also be clones.
Yep.
Again, I think this is a good time to bring up the newest game, Assassin's Creed Mirage, which everybody is going out of their gourd to say, hey, this is going to be a return to Assassin's Creed.
Even in the
I'm
beginning
going
of
to
the
tell you,
trailer, I was kind of excited. I saw this as a return to form. And then they basically call themselves the Order of Secrets or whatever the new name is. And I was like, you were this close. You guys were this close. You almost had me back. You had the Middle Eastern setting. You had the awesome protagonist with the actual hidden blade. It looked like you were going for the right gameplay again. And then you dropped the ball and announced that he was a character who was already introduced in Valhalla to be the reincarnation of Loki.
yeah, and ignoring all that, even if somebody who doesn't quite know all that, my problem with with Mirage is its aesthetic. It's being set in the middle of the ninth century, the 850s basically, in Baghdad. You
During
want to know
the
what was going on in
Islamic
Baghdad?
Golden Age, but not much was going
During
on in Baghdad itself outside of the House of Wisdom, which was just a bunch of old men sitting around and thinking.
Exactly. This is a time period of prosperity and peace, not political strife and intrigue, not war. And that's the problem. If they had set this game later, in the 900s, for example, that would have been a lot more interesting because the Byzantines were being put on the back foot. You had multiple sultanates that were fighting each other, ultimately to pretty much be the new Muhammad. You had the Sunnis, you had the Shia, they were fighting each other, what have you. This is actually why the First Crusade was as successful as it was. The Crusaders hit them at the right time when basically the Saracens were locked in the middle of a civil war.
This is also
If they
why
had
the
been
Iran
set,
Iraq War actually happened, a continuation of this conflict.
yeah, the Shias and the Sunnis fighting each other and killing each other because there can only be one Muhammad. There can only be one ruler of Mecca. But
Unfortunately
yeah,
for them, it's
again,
the shifty camel traders.
but again, yeah, there's not a lot to Mirage. There's not a lot of stuff really to look forward to in this game.
No,
And that's the funny thing. It's
the synopsis, what little it is, you experience the story of Bashim, a cunning street thief seeking answers and justice as he navigates through the bustling streets of ninth century Baghdad. Wait, it is ninth century. But it says it's 20 years before Valhalla. That was 850. No, 870.
no, hold on. Good, but the thing is that you have to remember with 9th century, 10th century, what have you, it's
Ah,
set after Christ.
yeah,
So
yeah, no year one.
the
No, no
ninth,
year zero. Got it.
right? So yeah, basically the 900s I was talking about that would have been the 10th century.
Ah, gotcha. Anyway,
And the First Crusade that happened at the very end of the 11th. So continue.
through a mysterious and ancient organization known as the Head Ones, he will become a deadly master assassin and change the fate in ways he never could have imagined. It describes no historic events other than its ninth century Baghdad, and that's about it.
It's basically Aladdin. But let's be honest here. It's Aladdin if it was an Assassin's Creed game, which is what is with this obsession of Aladdin? Like You have Ezra from Star Wars Rebels. He's basically Aladdin. Lothal was basically Baghdad from the Aladdin movies. You've had what a couple different attempts to bring that thing to live action. Now you have Assassin's Creed Aladdin. Like, what's the obsession with this character?
Um, gotta eat to live, gotta steal to eat. Could tell you all about it when I got the time.
I guess.
Do we want to show the trailer so we can talk about it?
I mean,
Since there's nothing to talk about
don't.
with Valhalla's last chapter, because there's even less information on that. You're playing as Ivor, canonically female, reincarnation of Onan, and it is apparently their last journey. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, I could turn on my screen. We could take a look at it. There's probably
Alright.
not gonna be a lot to talk about, but we'll see.
Yeah, we might as well fill out this video. Can you open up the screen share?
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Let me just give me a sec because I also got to do this with OBS. For those of you not in the know, doing streams is not so much just turn on a microphone, turn on a picture, and chat. There is a little bit of work going on. Give me.
Yeah, OBS is kind of a harsh mistress. It's even harder trying to stream. Like anyone who's followed my channel knows that me and the Deathcore of Creed guys tried to stream a game in Dawn of War, and yeah, that took a lot of time to get that set up.
Do you get? Is it on the screen? Should be on the
Yeah,
screen.
it's on the screen.
Okie doke.
Peggy 18.
Got a bit of
Give me
echo.
1 second. Yeah, give me 1 second.
Basim Ebne Ishaq, are you ready to give up who you once thought you were?
I am.
Okay, funny thing about the voice actress here, I don't remember her name, but I think she's an Iranian lady. She's Avsarala from The Expanse. Anyone has seen that series, you know who this is. I find it absolutely hilarious that you have an Iranian lady. You know, I don't know if she is still Muslim or not, but she was raised. Crap. Kuba, what sect of Islam is Iran?
I believe they're the Sunnis.
Right. You have a Sunni lady, right? She's probably playing as a Shia Muslim in 9th century Baghdad. I just let that sink in for a second. Oh my god, the man even. Let me back that up.
Thought you were.
I am.
The man even looks like Aladdin. Look at him. Oh, jeez.
Whoops. I forgot we need the volume on our end.
Ready to
I'm sorry, what? OBS glitched out for a sec. Continue.
sacrifice everything you held close.
I am.
All right, first off, I have to give them some pretty good credit. At least with whoever made this trailer, they did a really good job of depicting the atmosphere and the look of Baghdad at this time. You know, this is a very prosperous point in period, so people wearing bright, colorful clothes.
This is why I was excited. It recaptures the feel of the very first Assassin's Creed, which was set during the Third Crusade, the King's Crusade, within the cities of Acre, Damas, and Jerusalem itself, where you very much would see marketplaces like these.
Are you ready to leave?
I found it hilarious that the shopkeeper guy calls him an infidel.
Well,
Why would he call him an infidel? Like
That's-
he's a thief. He's not an infidel.
that's the thing. During those times they would use the term infidel for basically I don't like you or you're a criminal. Committing crimes is basically committing crimes against Allah.
Oh, so basically it was their version of alt-right and woke.
Yeah, pretty much.
Are you ready to leave your life behind and walk the path of shadows?
I am.
Can you pause? See that when you saw the glowing knife on the screen? This is why I was so excited, because going off of the lore from Assassin's Creed 2, when Leonardo da Vinci was telling Ezio about what you needed to get the hidden blade to actually work, and those days the assassins would have to sacrifice a finger as a sign of their submission to the Assassin's Creed. Of course, Leonardo made a workaround of that Ezio could keep all 10 of his fingers, but this is basically what this is. What he's going to do is, with that knife, they're going to slice off his ring finger, which will show his devotion to the Creed and allow him to use the Creed's hidden blade.
Yeah, in fact, I kind of love how in Assassin's Creed 2, Leonardo doesn't even tell Ezio that he doesn't have to sacrifice his finger until they've almost got the blade out. He's like, oh, I found a
Yeah.
workaround. You don't have to give up a finger. I'm like,
Leonardo
Yeah,
is
keep
a
going
fun
there, man.
troll.
yeah,
This is
yeah, he is.
his character is literally why every time I get to that one mission in Venice, where you have the option to hug him, and if I ever miss it, I will redo that mission again because you always hug your bro Leonardo. He's like a teddy bear.
Yeah. So in this situation, more than likely, the punishment back then for thievery would have been losing a hand.
Yep,
But since they had to chase him,
they
they
would
probably
kill
were
him.
going to take more than that.
They would
Yeah,
kill him.
It's like Chris Rock said, if the cops gotta come chase you, they're bringing an ass whooping.
Yep. And even the robes that assassin is wearing, very much reminiscent of the robes worn in the first game, the robes of Altair.
Here's something I don't quite understand though. Why is this assassin exposing? I'm guessing it's a woman. Why is this assassin exposing herself to save this straight rat? Like, what significance does he have other than he has some parkour skills?
Mm. I mean, it kind of goes against the creed never to. Oh, you'll see later on. They show it.
And from the light, you will return to the dark.
From the dark, you serve the light.
Never forget the tenets you have sworn to uphold. Stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent. Hide in plain sight.
Okay, that's a big no-no, especially during this time. Charity was one of the core tenets of Islam at this point. So, if you had a guy who was literally dismissing and even outright beating beggars, oh, that's basically haram.
That's
during this
that's
time
the
period.
thing.
Your
That's the
reputation is going to take a hit.
That's the thing, though. These aren't just ordinary people. These are either they are a nobleman's bodyguards or they are the town police itself, who kind of ran on different rules. Let's be honest.
Oh, I understand that, but the thing is with nobles, again, charity, core tenet of Islam. If you don't show charity to the beggars, that's going to reflect badly on your reputation. And in Baghdad, reputation is as valuable as currency.
Mm-hmm. Continue.
Never compromise the Brotherhood.
Pause it. Now, the smoke bombs, I don't have a problem with. That poison grenade, the poison mine trap, however, that's something you would see in Assassin's Creed Revelations, but Assassin's Creed Revelations takes place in 1500, and it's very much implied traps like that were basically invented by Ishak Pasha, who didn't exist until the late 1400s.
Yeah, so we have some anachronistic technology going on here. Now you could say, well, this is the golden age of Baghdad. Yeah, the golden age of Baghdad when it came to philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics. Not when it came to technology. Not like this.
Nope. They didn't have flying cars just because they were a golden age.
From this day forward, you are a hidden one.
I also find it a little bit weird this guy does not have a beard. At this point in time, everybody had a beard.
Yep.
In fact, it was kind of frowned upon to not have a beard.
Yep. It's like being in Puerto Rico. If you don't have a mustache, you're not a man.
Exactly. Even my buddy Ali, back in high school, we were in ROTC, Iraqi kid. Some folks were making fun of the fact that I was very hairy. I had hairy limbs, what have you. I was trying to grow a beard, and they made fun of me for that. And the guy basically said that if you have no hair, you're a woman.
Yep.
And to be fair, these were emo kids, so yeah, they basically were women. Hold on a second, back up.
Yeah, those masks are basically uniform for the Order of the Ancients, and that does look like it's depicting the first Emperor Sargon of Akkad.
Yeah. So why does this guy have it
Because
at this point in time?
Because he's a member of the Order of the Ancients, the precursors to the Templars. That's why you're out killing him.
So instead of having the cross, he has the mask.
Uh-huh. And then it would become a cross, and eventually it'd become a ring.
I find it kind of interesting that they've made Sargon of Akkad the villain. I don't know if that's supposed to be a peg against the YouTuber
It probably
and
is.
pseudo-philosopher Sargon of Akkad, but I find that kind of insulting because Sargon of Akkad is one of the most important historical figures of the ancient period.
But Tracer, Gamergate happened, and Ubisoft, they respect the Womans.
Who cares? See, again, this is where the cracks start to show. And in fact, the game is a good name for it, Mirage. You're seeing the mirage of a potentially good game, but you're starting to see the cracks in it where they're disregarding history.
Mm-hmm. And here's the worst part. Remember what we said about fantasy monsters?
Was that a Jin?
Yeah. That pretty much was the nail in the coffin. As soon as I saw this, I knew, no, this wasn't a return to form. They're just using that as a marketing term. It's more of the same.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that we have an actual character instead of an avatar. Doesn't matter that they're shoving lesbians in anachronistic periods in our face. The very core of Assassin's Creed is historical fiction, and they've shown their hand that this is going to be even more fantasy bullshit.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little bit confused as to why this Jin is showing up after he kills this guy.
No idea. This character is supposed to be the reincarnation of Loki, so maybe that's one of the wolves.
Maybe. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, folks, but the moment that they introduce things like aliens and crap like that, now you got some problems, and it's basically caused all this crap to happen. What is with these people wanting to put aliens in the ancient period? But not in a way that would be interesting, as in aliens having to actually integrate with society. No, it's aliens built the pyramids.
But bro, I'm not saying that it's aliens, but it was aliens.
Aliens. Oh man, so sad. So sad. I mean,
First they killed the
want-
History Channel, and now they're killing the history games.
Yeah, pretty much. And here's me. All I want is a proper medieval game where I could play as a knight, or I could play as a Templar, or something like that.
Nope. You have to fight fantasy monsters. That's the rule.
Mm-hmm. Yep, unfortunately. Is there anything else to this trailer, or is it just...
It's
the coming?
just a rest. And the I don't know. You want to bring up the other 3 trailers for the other 3 games? Codename Red, Codename Green, and Codename Witch.
Give me a second. Assassin's Creed... Which?
Yeah, it's that one.
Yeah,
it's
Project...
a really. Let me explain what this is first. Project Codename Infinity is basically a set of 3 games.
Some of the other
studios. A set of 3 games in which they're basically making these all together. One of them's a mobile game. Codename Red is, we don't know what that is yet, but it could be a full game. And then there's Codename Hex, which we have no idea what this is. They're being developed together, and they will share a multiplayer through Codename Infinity. What that means, I have no clue. Maybe it's going to be even more Deadliest Warrior bullshit. But there's not that much to Codename Project Infinity, so you don't need to look it up.
Okay.
So what's Montreal up to right now?
Well, we have our veteran team behind Assassin's Creed Valhalla in Montreal, the birthplace of Assassin's Creed.
Makes sense,
who's been
doesn't
hard
it?
at work on a new flagship title as well. It is being led by creative director Clint Hawking, and is a very different type of Assassin's Creed game.
And I believe
Very different type. You mean an actual Assassin's Creed game? Because you've been making nothing but not Assassin's Creed games.
Oh, how much you want to bet it's just going to be a survival horror ripoff of Slender the 8 Pages?
Well, that's the thing. The name Hex is German for witch.
And
so...
it is confirmed to take place in the Holy Roman Empire during the witch hunts.
believe you may have brought us something that we can watch now. Yes, here it is.
Now, if this wasn't part of the Assassin's Creed showcase, I would think that it had something to do with another Blair Witch Project game. So from the team that said Vikings did literally nothing wrong, now we're gonna get Devil Worshippers did literally nothing wrong. Because unlike all of the other witch hunts, the Holy Roman Empire actually found some witches. Most of them were pagans who were sacrificing children to their pagan gods, but still.
Yeah, the thing is about the witch craze is most people only really seem to know about the Spanish and the Puritan one. The witch craze is all over the place. It was obviously in England, Germany, Poland,
Italy
even
had one.
even the Islamic world kind of went through that for a bit. And the thing is, yes, it was established by the Catholic Church because they needed new enemies because they just kind of kicked out the Muslims from Spain. But the thing is, there were actual witches, there were actual Luciferians, they were doing some pretty evil shit. It's just the grand majority of the people that the Inquisitions ultimately went after were political enemies.
hmm So we got things like the what's it called, the witch hunt. However, in the Holy Roman Empire, we still have remnants of the actual pagan death cults that still existed in the region, which is primarily what was being hunted and persecuted against. And unlike all the other cases, like with Matthew Hopkins in England, the Salem witch trials, and so on and so forth, where they found no witches and basically were persecuting innocent people, in the actual Holy Roman Empire one, they were finding, well, they didn't find actual witches because witches isn't real, but they were finding remnants of Germanic cults who were kidnapping and sacrificing children and livestock. So these weren't good people for the most part who were being put up against the pyre. Now, it doesn't justify all of the other witch hunts we've had in history, but it does go to say that it's not always black and white.
Nope.
Let's see Codename
Alright,
Red.
let's take a look at this.
Codename Red is interesting.
Japan.
Yep. Finally, what should have been Game 5. Japan with ninjas. But you want to know the worst part? They already made this game. It's called Ghost of Tsushima. They also made it again. It's all called Ryuga Gogotoku Ishin, and it's coming out as a remaster from the studio that made Yakuza. And they also made this game in Neo. They made it in Neo 2. There are so many open world feudal Japanese games made in the period where Ubisoft could have made one, but didn't because, it's old and played out. We don't want to do Japan. And now that all these games, particularly Ghost of Tsushima, got popular and made a lot of money, that's when they want to do it.
And just like with Hex, I doubt they're going to do the series. I doubt they're going to do the time period justice.
No, they're not. It seems to be set. I don't. Let me. Because I have the Wikipedia. You can get Codename Red ready while I talk about this. According to the Vice President, Executive Producer, Mark Alexis, French name, Codename Red will take place in feudal Japan and allow players to experience a very shinobi fantasy. They don't even have a set time period outside of feudal Japan. We don't know if it's the Edo period. We don't know if it's the Sengoku Jedi. We don't know if it's anywhere between the
Warring States period,
the Mongol and anywhere
shogunates.
between the Mongol invasion when samurai and shinobi first became a thing to the Onin War which was the start of the Sengoku Jidai period, which till the Edo period, all the way to the Meiji Restoration, is what's considered feudal Japan. So you cast a very wide net, and I imagine even Team Ninja is working on one of these open world, and theirs is even more interesting because it's set during the Meiji Restoration. I don't remember what it was called, but it was announced in a stream just before the Tokyo Game Show, and I've been meaning to find it again.
Yeah, folks. if you want an idea of what the Meiji Restoration looked like, go watch Last Samurai.
It's great. Last
It's not
Samurai is
the
a great
most
movie too.
it's not the most historical movie, but it does a really good job of capturing um, basically what was going on during the time period.
Oh no, the complete contrary to what you'd expect out of a Tom Cruise movie. The only thing they got wrong was the characters' names because it was obviously the Satsuma Rebellion, and
Mhm.
the main Japanese guy was obviously Saigo. What was his last
Uh,
name? Takamori.
Katsumori, yeah,
Kat-
Katsumori. And Nathan Algren's character, you're gonna hate this, Koopa. He was not American. He was French.
I know, and so was Tom Cruise's character, because there was also a Frenchman who got captured by the samurai and basically fell in love with their culture. That's
Yeah,
he was one of the reasons why we even heard of the Satsuma Rebellion out in the West.
yeah. But regardless, it's a good movie. It's a great movie, and honestly, a game set during that time period would be excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of the Total War games, set during are even set during that period where you have to cultivate European allies. You have the Americans, you have the Germans, the British, the French. I don't know if the Russians are involved or not. But yeah, you have this period of rapid industrialization and cultural change in Japan where they're trying to become a Western nation. And you would have had the traditionalists and the guys who wanted to not be humiliated by the West coming to blows. That would be an excellent time period to set an Assassin's Creed game.
It's the nature of time that the old ways must give in. It's the nature of time that the new ways come with sin. When the new meets the old, it always
much.
ends the ancient ways. And as history is told, the old ways go out in a blaze. Encircled by a vulture, the end of ancient culture, the dawn of history is here. I'm not going to quote the whole song.
You don't need to.
Alright, and lastly there was Codename Jade.
Good name, Jay. Okay.
This one is kind of interesting because it's the only one that they actually captured in engine. It's not just a teaser. And you got to remember, it's a mobile game. For a mobile game, it looks very good. Because if this is all in engine, this looks really, really good. And just goes to show that mobile games aren't just sit on the toilet, waste your time puzzle games anymore. They're actually making some strides to make it get a legitimate gaming platform. The thing is, it's still a mobile game, and it's probably going to be full of gotcha bullshit.
Is this set during the Ming period? Because this looks like Ming China.
I think it's set. Let me, because I remember to get the pages open. 215 BCE. Can we have a quick rant about BCE, CE, and BC AD?
Look, folks, when your idea for an alternative dating system is to literally just name change the Gregorian calendar, all the while basically keeping the whole thing, you kind of fail.
Year
You wanna make a
zero
new
is still the
calendar
birth of Christ. You
Yep.
friggin' degenerate atheists still have the birth of Christ as the start of a new era. You morons. Stop putting bananas up your butts and actually listen to people.
Yeah, if you want to actually go and create a new calendar system, go for it, whatever. I personally am a little bit intrigued about the 13th month system, but whatever. It's just like with the Big Bang. Stephen Hawking hates it
Wait.
because
13-month system. Is that 13th month Smarch by any chance? With the stupid Smarch weather? Don't touch
it's
Willie.
something else.
Good advice.
No, it's something different. 13 months is basically, if I remember correctly, I don't remember how many days are in each month, but each month has an equal number of days, and you basically have 2 New Year days. One set at the beginning and one set at the end.
Sounds like a
I
big
don't
pain in the
necessarily
butt,
think it's.
especially since right now I organize my content by having it one a week, but I move it to days where the video I always have to make 4.
Yeah, I think every month under the system would. I think it would be 28 days each, because yeah, that's 7 times 4, right? 28.
That would be easy for me, but what I was gonna do next year is just pick a day, a weekend day, probably Friday, upload videos, and whenever there's an extra day, we would just come on and stream.
Yeah, pretty much. Regardless, go make your own calendar system.
Yeah.
Let's get into this.
But it's sent during the Qin Dynasty, after the Ming
Okay.
Dynasty. So the Great Wall is already there, and the Mongols were already removed.
Do you mean the Huns? Because the Mongols won't be a thing for another 1,000 years.
No, I mean the Mongols because they're from Mongolia.
Okay.
And also during this time, the Huns are making their way to destroy the Roman Empire and be defeated by Mulan. Now for a mobile game, this looks incredibly good. Good enough that they're probably, if it's successful, they're probably going to bring it to the consoles and PC as well. The thing is, it's a mobile
Probably.
game, and mobile games kind of have that reputation of being loot box farms, which, knowing Ubisoft, they're probably going to do. I mean, I would love a
Probably.
game set in China, maybe a Three Kingdoms game. And I would. They even set up in Assassin's Creed 2's tie-in movie, Assassin's Creed Ember. They even set up Xiao Jun, a Chinese assassin woman from basically the 1500s China, which is Chinese history is interesting in that we don't know much about it, and everything we do about it is from expatriates, because Mao Zedong burned a lot of Chinese history to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck him.
It's actually a little bit surprising it's taken Ubisoft this long to make a game about China, because you did have that craze period where everyone wanted to get into China, wanted to break into that market. I find it kind of interesting it took them this long to make something like that, and it's for a mobile game.
Well, of course, it's for a mobile game. It's the most popular platform for gaming in China.
Hmm.
And Korea, actually. That's why Korean games are the way they are.
So yeah, it looks good for a mobile game. Don't know necessarily what they're gonna do with it, or if it's gonna be successful or not.
It looks good for a mobile game. It's probably gonna be exploitative bullshit, and it's probably gonna end up being brought to some sort of court because they're already in Europe bringing loot boxes to court. Like, I'm all for companies' rights to make what they want, but on the other hand, we the gamers warned you how many friggin' times about this, and you didn't listen. Could have turned back at any point, and you didn't.
Nope.
But
So yeah,
and that's it for the games. But if we want to be brief before wrapping it up, can also talk a little bit about their Netflix projects because they have 3 of those, and there's not much out on those. The first one is an Assassin's Creed television series, an animated series. It's being developed by Ubisoft Film and Television. It's going to air on Netflix. Its date is unconfirmed, but it's confirmed that the producer is going to be Adi Shankar, who wrote and produced the Castlevania Netflix series.
yeah. If you're a Castlevania fan of at least the games and its general lore, you know what this means. They're going to take Assassin's Creed, they're going to strip out a lot of its interesting tenets, and then they're going to replace it with a lot of hipster bullshit.
Yep.
And more than likely, this thing is said at any point during medieval Europe, they're going to go out of its way to demonize the Catholic Church, because I guess that's the new hip thing nowadays.
Yeah. Leftism back in the day was all about Catholic bashing. Leftism now is all about Catholic bashing. The only difference is the race they claim to be for. Secondly, there's an Assassin's Creed anime being developed by Ubisoft Film and Television. However, because it's being developed by a Western company in the West, it's not really an anime, is it? And there's even less known about this. They don't even have a producer yet. There's no confirmed... nothing confirmed other than it's in its early stages of development as of October 2020. And finally, there's the Assassin's Creed television series, which is also going to be Ubisoft Film and Television. It's also going to be on Netflix, and it's going to be produced by Jason Altman and Danielle Krynick, who I will look them up right now. Its writer is Jeb Stewart. No, not that Jeb Stewart. He died during the Civil War.
It's Jeb Stewart
He's
reincarnated.
He's best known for his work on Die Hard, and recently served as a writer and showrunner for the Netflix series Vikings Valhalla, which is a continuation of History Channel's Vikings.
Oh, great. You mean the series where we have a black female Jarl who's apparently from somewhere in Africa?
Yep. And the other two, I just looked them up right now. They have no credits under their belt. They're not even from the Assassin's Creed movie. The series was revealed to be in its early stages of development in October 2020, yada yada yada. In February 2022, Jeb Stewart provided a disappointing update to the playlist. They're still in the casting process even. And they just announced at the 15th anniversary that this is still going on. So this has been in development hell for a while along with the other series, but they still feel like, hey, let's announce these. They're coming to Netflix.
Right, which probably means all three of them are going to suck.
No,
That being said, it would be hilarious if Jeb Stewart's version has straight up Confederate assassins.
I would love an Assassin's Creed Civil War game where we see a civil war not only of the United States, but of both the Templar and Assassin factions over various different ideological bents.
Honestly, yeah, a proper historical game set during the Civil War would be absolutely fascinating.
But yeah, we may as well wrap things up here.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm sorry to say this, folks, but Assassin's Creed
Is dead.
It's a mirage. It's a mirage, plain and simple. They're trying to trick you into thinking that there's a golden future, that they're going back to basics. They're not. They're just concealing what they're doing because they don't want to stop.
It started dying with Freedom Cry and Unity, where they spread their teams too thin and started inserting a lot of ideological bullshit. We saw even more of it with Syndicate, that even though it wasn't a buggy mess, it was still a very boring, mediocre game. We saw them take a year off for Origin, and Origin came out and dumped the Assassin's Creed identity into the Nile River and fed it to the actual living god Silbeck, who is an actual thing in the game, where you play as a character who doesn't even matter because his ex-wife is the important one, and that's the entire message of the game, is how strong and brave and beautiful women are. And then they did it again with Odyssey, and then they did it again with Valhalla. Just the same game 3 times.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
The most offensive thing is that this used to be a good series.
Yeah, even with somebody who did not agree with some of the approaches they took to history, they still went out of their way to properly recreate these worlds, to make it feel lived in, to make it feel like you are taking a time machine, you're going back in time. That's what the appeal of the game was. Yeah, the parkour, the assassination stuff, that's all fascinating, and the Illuminati, but it was the history that drew people in. And they've forgotten that.
They chose to forget it. What they did was they ignored the history and substituted their own. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in the near future we just see Assassin's Creed Antifa Edition at this point.
Probably. I mean, isn't that basically Watch Dogs?
Fair point. Any last words before we wrap it up?
What was that? How did it go? Ozymandias. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. And all that remains is the broken statue of the god king Ozymandias in a tomb of his empire, now long ago given to the winds of history.
Yep. Well, Assassin's Creed sucks now. There's no hope. I'll probably do another one of these with someone else for Pokemon. Good night, everybody!
Auf Wiedersehen.
I'm gonna give it a sec because it cut us off last time. 3, 2, 1, ending.